The Ventaxian Imperium crushed every species in the galaxy beneath its ruthless boot of domination, except one, the humans, who would rather die than yield to the alien scum. Aboard the Imperial flagship, Indus swirled his intoxicant in its crystal flute, gazing out at the stars his race ruled. "When I was but a hatchling, the Imperium completed its final conquest," the old diplomat said. "After centuries, no known race remained to challenge our supremacy." His aide Zortax grinned. "Not surprising. Who could withstand our unstoppable fleets and planet-breaking weapons?" Indus glanced over. "One species did. We never speak of it, but there is a system our ships avoid belonging to a primitive but troublesome race called humans." Zortax leaned in. "What? How have I never heard this?" "The first expedition there ended in catastrophe. Every leader since has known to give them a wide berth. It began when our probes detected radio waves from an unremarkable yellow star." Indus tapped the controls, opening a holographic star chart. "Sol system. When our warships arrived to subdue the planet called Earth, the humans fought back with a ferocity we never imagined. Outnumbered millions to one, they boarded our craft, slaughtering entire crews in brutal melees. Their suicidal attacks decimated our forces. No matter how many fell to our superior weapons, more kept coming, unrelenting. They even detonated fusion bombs among their own cities just to eliminate our landing parties. Rather than press the invasion, the Supreme Commander ordered a withdrawal. He said it would waste too many resources to conquer an isolated backwater." Zortax shook his head in disbelief. "One undeveloped species fought the Imperium to a standstill. How? What makes them so dangerous?" Indus narrowed his eyes. "Tenacity. Humans do not know the meaning of surrender. They would sacrifice anything, endure any hardship, to remain undefeated. An enemy who will stop at nothing to destroy you is the most terrifying thing in the universe." Zortax leans forward, hanging on to Indus's every word. "So what happened next? How did the humans respond to the warships?" Indus takes a long swig of his drink before continuing. "At first, nothing. Our ships took up position in orbit around their planet, weapons primed and ready to fire. We transmitted our demands again, certain that the sight of our armada would quell their resistance." Zortax frowns. "Surely our point defense systems were more than capable of intercepting such archaic weapons." "Under normal circumstances, yes," Indus agrees. "But we had underestimated human cunning. The missiles were a mere distraction. While our attention was focused on neutralizing the nuclear threat, their real attack came from an unexpected quarter." The elder diplomat's voice drops to a hushed whisper. "In a move that caught us completely off guard, a swarm of small manned spacecraft emerged from hidden bases on their moon. They had managed to conceal these ships from our scans, no mean feat given the sophistication of our sensors." Indus's eyes take on a haunted look. Those tiny vessels, they were little more than suicide pods, stripped down to bare essentials and packed with high explosives. And yet in the hands of human pilots, they became the most terrifying weapon we had ever faced. Zortax listens in rapt attention as Indus continues his grim tale. "The humans, they flew their ships directly at ours, heedless of the withering fire we rained down upon them. They dodged and weaved through storms of plasma with breathtaking skill, always pressing closer, ever relentless." A shudder runs through Indus's frame. "And when they were close enough, they rammed our warships, smashed themselves to atoms against our hulls in blinding flashes of self-immolation. Each explosion tore gaping wounds in our ship's defenses." The diplomat trails off, his gaze distant and haunted. Zortax swallows hard, trying to imagine the carnage. By the stars, how could any species be so callous as to throw away their own lives in such a manner? Indus gives a mirthless chuckle. "That, my young friend, is the crux of it. To humans, self-sacrifice in defense of their world is the highest of virtues. They see it not as throwing their lives away, but as achieving immortality through their defiance." He takes another long pull from his drink before continuing. "Wave after wave of those accursed suicide ships slammed into our fleet. For every one we destroyed, 3 more rose to take its place. Our point defenses glowed white-hot from the constant barrage, but still the humans came. Zortax shakes his head in disbelief. Incredible and terrifying. How does one fight an enemy who does not fear death? Indus meets his aide's gaze, his expression grim. In the end, we couldn't. After sustaining unimaginable losses, our squadron commander ordered a full retreat. The once mighty Ventaxian war fleet, fleeing before the onslaught of a supposedly primitive species. The elder diplomat drains the last of his drink in one gulp. We had learned a bitter lesson that day. The humans, they are unlike any foe we have ever faced. Their tenacity, their indomitable will, it defies all logic and reason. Zortax sits back heavily, trying to process the enormity of what he has just heard. And so we have left them alone ever since, out of fear. Indus nods slowly. Fear and a grudging respect. The Imperium's leadership made a calculated decision. The resources required to subjugate Earth would be immense, and the losses we would inevitably sustain would weaken us dramatically. So yes, we have left the humans to their own devices, while striving to ensure they never learn the true reason for our forbearance. The elder diplomat fixes Zortax with the intent stare. Mark my words, young one. The humans may be primitive by our standards, but they possess a strength of spirit that is unmatched in the galaxy. Pray that they never choose to turn that strength against us. Zortax nods, a newfound respect and trepidation for the mysterious humans settling over him like a shroud. Indus's tale has given him much to ponder and much to fear. The two sit in silence for a long moment, each lost in their own thoughts as the stars drift by outside the viewport. A species that does not know surrender, that will fight to the last even against impossible odds. What manner of being could be so indomitable? And what would happen if the full might of the Imperium was ever brought to bear against them? Zortax's jaw drops open in disbelief. They managed to fend off an orbital strike. How in the name of the Imperium is that possible? Indus leans back, his expression grim. As it turns out, the humans had been busy little creatures. While our probes were assessing their technology, they were working on surprises of their own. When Zardax's ships opened fire, they found their targeting systems jammed by some kind of interference field, emanating from the planet's surface. The senior diplomat shakes his head. It was like nothing we'd ever seen. Our sensors were blinded, our weapons rendered inaccurate, and while we were reeling from that unexpected development, the humans launched their counterattack. Zortax listens intently, his earlier skepticism replaced by a growing sense of unease. Counterattack with what? I thought you said their ships were primitive. Indus nods. They were compared to ours, but what they lacked in sophistication they made up for in sheer audacity. The humans had converted a number of their cargo vessels into makeshift boarding craft. They used the chaos of our failed orbital strike to close in on our ships and latch on like leeches. The elder diplomat's voice takes on a note of reluctant admiration. I have to give them credit. It was a bold move, one we never saw coming. Those cargo ships were little more than tin cans with attitude, but they served their purpose. They delivered human boarding parties onto our warships. Zortax's eyes widen. They boarded our ships in the middle of a space battle? That's insane. Indus chuckles darkly. Insane, yes, but effective. You see, while we Ventaxians are formidable warriors on the ground, we're not used to fighting in the cramped confines of a starship. The humans, on the other hand... He trails off, his expression distant. They excel at it. Those powered armored soldiers of theirs, they rampage through our ships like demons. Our crews were caught completely off guard. The close quarters negated our technological advantage, and the humans, they fought with a savagery I've never witnessed before. Zortax shakes his head, trying to wrap his mind around the concept. So what happened? Did they actually manage to capture any of our ships? Indus nods grimly. Capture? No. They did something far worse. Those boarding parties, they fought their way to the engine rooms of several of our warships, and once there, they set off antimatter charges. The senior diplomat closes his eyes as if reliving a painful memory. The explosions tore those ships apart from the inside out. One moment, They were proud vessels of the Imperium. The next, nothing but expanding clouds of debris. Zortak sits back heavily, stunned by the revelation. They sacrificed themselves just to take out our ships. That's insane, Indus supplies. Yes, we covered that, but it was also highly effective. In one fell swoop, the humans had decimated Zardax's squadron, the mighty Ventaxian war fleet, crippled by a bunch of ape-descended primitives in jury-rigged cargo haulers. The elder diplomat shakes his head ruefully. Zardax was beside himself with rage. He wanted to glass the entire planet from orbit, consequences be damned. But wiser heads prevailed. The Imperium's leadership, they saw the writing on the wall. We had severely underestimated the humans, and engaging them further would only lead to more losses. Zortax frowns. So what? We just left? Tucked our tails between our legs and ran? Indus shrugs. Strategically withdrew is the official term, but yes, essentially. Zardax was ordered to break off the attack and return to Ventaxian space. The humans had won the day through sheer tenacity and a willingness to sacrifice everything for victory. The senior diplomat takes a long sip of his drink, his gaze distant. It was a humbling experience, to say the least. The Imperium had never known defeat before, not in living memory. To be bested by a race we considered primitive, it shook us to our core. Zortax nods slowly, absorbing the weight of Indus' tale. And we've left them alone ever since? Zortax leans forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. Wait, the humans had more surprises in store. What else could they possibly throw at us after those infernal ravens? Indus takes a long pull from his drink, savoring the burn as it slides down his throat. He sets the glass down with a heavy thunk, his expression grim. Oh, they had plenty more up their sleeves, young one. You see, while our ships were reeling from the Raven assault, the humans launched a second wave. The elder diplomat's voice drops to a hushed whisper, as if he's sharing a dark secret. They sent out a fleet of what we initially thought were just more of their primitive fighters. But as they drew closer, our sensors picked up something strange. Zortax frowns, his brow furrowing. Strange how? Indus leans back, his eyes distant as he recalls the moment. These new ships, they were different, larger than the Ravens, but still far smaller than our warships, and they moved with a purpose, a determination that set them apart. He shakes his head, a note of reluctant admiration creeping into his voice. It wasn't until they were almost upon us that we realized the truth. These were no mere fighters. They were boarding craft. Zortax's jaw drops open in shock. Boarding craft? The humans were attempting to board our ships in the middle of a space battle? Indus nods grimly. Precisely. A tactic so audacious, so unexpected that it caught us completely off guard. And that's exactly what the humans were counting on. The senior diplomat's hands tighten around his glass as he continues. Those boarding craft, they latched onto our ships like parasites, disgorging swarms of human soldiers directly onto our decks. And these soldiers, they were something else entirely. Zortax leans in, hanging on Indus' every word. In what way? Indus' voice is barely above a whisper now. They wore some kind of advanced power armor, far beyond anything our intelligence had reported. It made them faster, stronger, more resilient than any ground troops we'd ever faced, and their weapons, by the stars, their weapons. He shudders, as if reliving a particularly harrowing memory. The humans carved through our ship's defenses like a plasma torch through durasteel. Our crews, already disoriented and demoralized by the Raven assault, were no match for these armored demons in close-quarters combat. Zortax sits back heavily, trying to process the enormity of what he's hearing. So, what happened? Did the humans actually manage to capture any of our ships? Indus barks out a short, humorless laugh. Capture? No, they had no interest in taking our ships intact. Their objective was far more insidious and effective. The elder diplomat drains the last of his drink in one gulp, slamming the empty glass down on the table. The human boarding parties fought their way to the engine rooms of several of our ships, and once there, They detonated some kind of high-yield explosive devices. Zortax's eyes widen in horror as the implications sink in. They scuttled our ships from the inside? Indus nods grimly. Scuttled, and utterly destroyed. Those explosions tore through our ship's hulls like tissue paper, igniting our reactor cores and setting off catastrophic chain reactions. In mere moments, some of the finest warships in the Imperium's fleet were reduced to nothing more than expanding clouds of irradiated debris. The senior diplomat closes his eyes, as if the memory is too painful to bear. It was a slaughter, plain and simple. The humans sacrificed their own soldiers, sent them on what amounted to suicide missions, just to cripple our fleet. And it worked. Zortax shakes his head in disbelief, trying to wrap his mind around the sheer ruthlessness of the human tactics. I can't even imagine the toll that must have taken on our forces, on Zardax himself. The elder diplomat's voice takes on a haunted tone. He gave the order to retreat, to flee back to Ventaxian space with our tails between our legs. It was the only decision he could make, given the circumstances. To press the attack would have been to invite even greater losses. Zortax nods slowly, a newfound respect and fear for the humans taking root in his mind. And so we left them alone, abandoned our plans for conquest, all because of the actions of one small backwater species. Indus meets his aide's gaze, his expression somber. Indeed, the Imperium's leadership made a calculated decision that day. The price of subduing the humans, of bending them to our will, was simply too high. Their tenacity, their utter refusal to surrender in the face of overwhelming odds. It was like nothing we had ever encountered before. The senior diplomat's voice drops to a whisper, as if he's sharing a dark secret. And so a decision was made at the highest levels of our government. The humans, Earth. They were to be left alone, never spoken of, never acknowledged. A dark blight on the Imperium's record of unbroken conquest, a shame to be buried and forgotten. Zortax sits in silence for a long moment, absorbing the weight of Indus's tale. But why tell me all this now? Why break the Imperium's code of silence after all these years? Indus leans forward, his eyes glinting with a strange intensity. Because, young one, the humans are on the move. After centuries of silence, our long-range probes have detected new activity around Earth. Ships, weapons, armies. They are preparing for something big. The elder diplomat's voice takes on a note of grim prophecy. And I fear that the Imperium's darkest day may yet lie ahead. For if the humans turn their gaze towards the stars once more, if they choose to bring their indomitable will to bear against us, then may the gods have mercy on us all. Zortax swallows hard, a chill running down his spine at the implications of Indus's words. He opens his mouth to speak, to ask a question, but the words die on his lips as a sudden klaxon blares through the ship's intercom. Indus's head snaps up, his expression one of pure dread. No, it can't be. The senior diplomat leaps to his feet, racing to the viewport with Zortax close on his heels. Together they stare out into the infinite expanse of space, and the sight that greets them sends a bolt of pure terror through their veins. There, silhouetted against the stars, is a fleet of ships unlike any the Ventaxian Imperium has ever seen. Sleek, predatory, bristling with weapons, and bearing the unmistakable insignia of the human race. Indus staggers back, his face ashen. They're here, the humans are here, and we are not ready. Zortax can only stare in mute horror as the human fleet advances, a sense of impending doom settling over him like a shroud. For he knows deep in his bones that the Imperium's reckoning has come at last, and that nothing will ever be the same again. Zortax's eyes widen in disbelief as Indus recounts the devastating human counterattack. They had an entire fleet hidden in the asteroid belt. How is that possible? Surely our sensors would have detected them. Indus shakes his head, his expression grim. That's what we thought as well, but these human ships, they were equipped with some kind of advanced cloaking technology. They were invisible to our scanners, hidden among the rocks and debris of the belt. The elder diplomat takes a shaky breath, the memory of the ambush still fresh in his mind. Our ships were already badly damaged from the battle near Earth. Shields weakened, hulls breached. We were in no condition for another fight. He clenches his fist, his voice tinged with a mix of anger and grudging respect. But the humans, they showed no mercy. Their ships appeared out of nowhere, like ghosts materializing from the void. They swarmed our crippled vessels like a pack of predators, striking with brutal precision. Zortax leans forward, his brow furrowed. What kind of weapons did they use? Surely nothing that could penetrate our armor. The senior diplomat's voice drops to a whisper, as if he's reliving the horror of the moment. Those rounds, they tore through our hulls like they were made of paper, punched clean through our ships from stem to stern, leaving gaping holes in their wake. Zortax sits back heavily, struggling to comprehend the scale of the defeat. 80% losses? I can't even imagine. How did any of our ships survive? Indus closes his eyes, his face etched with pain. Sheer luck, mostly. A few of our ships managed to jump to hyperspace before the humans could finish them off, but even then many were too badly damaged to make it home. He opens his eyes, his gaze haunted by the memory. I was on one of those ships. We limped back to Ventaxian space on a wing and a prayer. Our hull breached in a dozen places, life support barely functioning. More than half the crew died before we reached safe harbor. Zortax shakes his head in disbelief, trying to process the enormity of the disaster. And the humans, did they pursue us even then? Indus nods grimly. They did. A few of their ships followed us into hyperspace, harrying us all the way back to the border. It was like they were determined to finish what they started, to wipe us out completely. The senior diplomat's voice takes on a note of weary resignation. It was only the timely arrival of reinforcements from the Imperium that saved us in the end. A fresh fleet of warships that drove the humans back and allowed our battered survivors to limp home. Zortax sits in stunned silence for a long moment, trying to wrap his mind around the scale of the defeat. I had no idea. The histories never mentioned any of this. How could the Imperium keep such a catastrophic loss hidden? Indus smiles bitterly. The same way it always does, lies and propaganda. The official story was that our fleet encountered a spatial anomaly that caused severe damage and heavy casualties. The humans were never mentioned, their role in our defeat erased from the record. The elder diplomat leans forward, his eyes glinting with a mix of anger and regret. But those of us who were there, we know the truth. We know the price of underestimating the humans, of dismissing them as primitives to be conquered. He fixes Zortax with a piercing stare, his voice low and intense. And that, young one, is a mistake we must never make again. For if the humans could do this to us when they were still confined to their own system, imagine what they might be capable of now, with centuries of advancement behind them. Zortax swallows hard, a chill running down his spine at the implications of Indus's words. He opens his mouth to reply, but before he can speak, the ship's intercom crackles to life with a burst of static. "Alert, alert!" The voice of the ship's AI blares through the speakers, tinged with an unmistakable note of panic. "Unknown vessels detected on approach vector. Configuration matches no known Imperium or Allied designs. All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." Indus and Zortax exchange a look of pure dread, the elder diplomat's earlier words ringing in their ears with prophetic clarity. The reckoning they had long feared, the day when humanity's wrath would once again be visited upon the Imperium, it seemed that day had come at last. Zortax's eyes widen in disbelief. Berserkers? Bioengineered war beasts? I had no idea the humans possessed such capabilities. Indus nods grimly, his gaze distant as he recalls the terrifying creatures. Neither did we at first. Our soldiers reported seeing massive, hulking figures on the battlefield, standing alongside the human warriors. They were unlike any life form we had ever encountered. The elder diplomat takes another sip of his drink, his hand trembling slightly. The berserkers, they were relentless. Our weapons seemed to have little effect on them. They shrugged off plasma blasts and kinetic impacts like they were nothing, and kept coming at us with a single-minded fury. Zortax leans forward, his expression a mix of horror and fascination. What did they look like, these berserkers? Indus shakes his head. It was hard to get a clear visual. They moved so fast, and the chaos of battle made it difficult to focus on any one thing. But from the glimpses our soldiers caught, they were monstrous. Indus shudders, his eyes haunted. They had no faces, not as we understand them, just a single glowing eye in the center of what passed for a head, an eye that seemed to burn with an inner fire, an unquenchable rage. Indus spreads his hands helplessly. We don't know. Even now, after decades of study, our scientists are no closer to unraveling the secrets of the berserkers. All we know is that they turned the tide of battle against us, time and time again. The elder diplomat's expression turns grim. The berserkers tore through our ranks, scattering our warriors like leaves before a storm. They seemed to feel no pain, no fear. They just kept coming, no matter how many we cut down. Zortax shakes his head in disbelief. And combined with the humans' other advanced weapons and tactics, Indus nods. We didn't stand a chance. The humans had outmaneuvered us at every turn, luring us into a trap, and then unleashing their most terrifying creations upon us. It was a defeat so complete, so humiliating, that the Imperium has never truly recovered. The senior diplomat drains the last of his drink, setting the empty glass down with a heavy thunk. That was the last time we dared to challenge the humans directly. The last time we sent a fleet to Earth. We learned our lesson, at a cost far too high to bear. Zortax sits in silence for a long moment, absorbing the weight of Indus's words. The revelation of the humans' true power, their ability to create such terrifying weapons and warriors, it casts a new light on the Imperium's long-standing policy of avoidance and containment. The younger diplomat looks up, meeting Indus's haunted gaze. And now, with the humans on the move once more, you fear that we may face those horrors again. Indus nods slowly, his expression grim. I fear that we may face far worse, my young friend, for if the humans have continued to advance, to refine their weapons and their warriors, then the berserkers may be only the beginning of the nightmares they can unleash upon the galaxy. The two diplomats sit in silence, the weight of their thoughts and fears hanging heavy in the air. Zortax stares at Indus in stunned disbelief, his mind reeling from the revelation of Admiral Zardax's betrayal. I still can't believe it, he mutters, shaking his head. Zardax, of all people, how could he turn his back on the Imperium like that? Indus sighs heavily, his expression pained. It was a blow to all of us, Zortax. Zardax was a hero, a legend, the very embodiment of Ventaxian strength and loyalty. To learn that he had been secretly aiding the humans, that he had come to see them as superior to his own kind, it shook the very foundations of our society. The elder diplomat leans forward, his voice low and intense. But as shocking as Zardax's betrayal was, it was nothing compared to what came next. The negotiations with the humans, they were like nothing we had ever experienced before. Zortax frowns, leaning in closer. What do you mean? What happened during the negotiations? The senior diplomat's voice takes on a note of reluctant admiration. Their negotiators were brilliant, Zortax, sharp, cunning, and utterly ruthless. They seemed to know everything about us, our history, our culture, our weaknesses. It was as if they had been studying us for years, preparing for this very moment. Indus shrugs, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Zardax, I suppose. He must have been feeding them information for a long time, using his position to gather intelligence on the Imperium. But it wasn't just that. The humans seemed to have a natural gift for understanding other species, for getting inside their heads and anticipating their moves. The elder diplomat leans back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. In a way it was almost frightening, the ease with which they outmaneuvered us at every turn. They knew exactly what to say, what buttons to push, to get what they wanted. And what they wanted was nothing less than total control over the Imperium. Zortax gasps, his eyes widening in shock. Total control? You mean they wanted to conquer us, to make us their slaves? Indus shakes his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. No, Zortax, not slaves. Something far worse. The humans, they wanted us to join them willingly, to become part of their empire. They called it an alliance, but it was clear from the start who would be in charge. The senior diplomat's voice drops to a whisper, as if he's sharing a dark secret. And the worst part? Many of our own people agreed with them. After seeing the human strength, their technology, there were those who believed that joining them was our only hope for survival, that resisting them was a fool's errand doomed to failure. Zortax sits back heavily, his mind whirling with the implications of Indus's words. So, what happened then? Did we agree to their terms? Did we surrender? Indus closes his eyes for a long moment, as if gathering his thoughts. When he speaks again, his voice is heavy with resignation. In the end, we had no choice. The humans had us cornered, both militarily and politically. To refuse their offer would have meant war, a war we knew we could not win, and so with heavy hearts we signed the treaty. The Ventaxian Imperium, the greatest power in the known universe, became a vassal state of the human empire. The senior diplomat opens his eyes, his gaze haunted by the memory. It was a bitter pill to swallow, Zortax. To go from conquerors to conquered, from masters to servants, it was a humiliation beyond words. But we had underestimated the humans, had failed to see their true potential, and we paid the price for our arrogance. Zortax nods slowly, a sense of despair washing over him as he contemplates the fate of his once proud species. And now, here we are, a shadow of our former selves, living under the thumb of the very race we once sought to enslave. Indus sighs, his expression a mix of resignation and grudging respect. Indeed, the humans, they changed everything, Zortax. They rewrote the very rules of the game and emerged as the undisputed masters of the galaxy. And we were left to pick up the pieces to find our place in this new order. The elder diplomat leans forward, his eyes glinting with a strange intensity. But mark my words, young one, the story is far from over. The Imperium may be diminished, but we are not broken. We will adapt, we will endure, and one day, perhaps, we will rise again. For the Ventaxian spirit is a force to be reckoned with, and not even the might of the human empire can extinguish it forever. Zortax nods, a flicker of hope kindling in his chest at Indus's words. The road ahead would be long and difficult, fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but as long as the Ventaxian people remained true to themselves, as long as they held fast to their pride and their indomitable will, then perhaps, just perhaps, there was still a chance for redemption. For a future in which the Imperium would once again stand tall among the stars, a power to be reckoned with. And the humans, for all their strength and cunning, would learn to respect and fear the name of Ventax once more. Zortax frowns, his brow furrowing as he considers Indus's words. But surely not everyone was happy with these changes. I can't imagine the old guard just rolling over and accepting the humans' demands. Indus nods, his expression grim. You're right. There was significant resistance, especially from the more traditional elements of our society. Many of the noble houses in particular were outraged at the idea of giving up their power and privileges. The elder diplomat leans back in his seat, his gaze distant as he recalls the turbulent times. There were protests, even riots in some cases. The old guard tried to rally support, to paint the humans as conquerors and tyrants seeking to destroy our way of life. Zortax listens intently, trying to imagine the chaos and upheaval that must have gripped the Imperium. How did the reformers handle this opposition? Surely they must have faced significant challenges. Indus chuckles dryly. Oh, they did, but they had a powerful ally in their corner, Zardax. The former admiral threw himself into the reform efforts with the same zeal and determination he had once shown in battle. The senior diplomat's voice takes on a note of admiration. Zardax traveled the length and breadth of the Imperium, speaking to the people, rallying support for the changes. He argued passionately that the old ways had led us to ruin, that we needed to embrace a new path if we wanted to survive and prosper. Many did, Indus confirms. Zardax had always been a respected figure, a hero to the common folk. His support lent legitimacy to the reform movement, made it seem less like a foreign imposition and more like a necessary step forward. Zortax leans forward, fascinated. How so? What finally tipped the balance? Indus smiles, a glint of satisfaction in his eye. Ironically, it was the very thing the old guard had feared most: exposure to human culture and ideas. As part of the reforms, we began to open up to the wider galaxy, to send our people out to learn and trade with other species. The senior diplomat's voice takes on a note of wonder. And what they found, it was astonishing. The humans, for all their strangeness, had achieved things we had never dreamed of. Their art, their science, their philosophy. It was like a whole new universe opening up before us. Zortax nods, beginning to understand. And as our people saw these wonders, experienced these new ideas, they began to question the old ways. Exactly, Indus confirms. The more we learned about the humans and their allies, the more we realized how much we had been missing out on, how narrow and limited our own perspective had been. The elder diplomat leans back, a smile playing across his features. Gradually, bit by bit, the resistance crumbled. The old guard, once so fierce and unyielding, found themselves increasingly isolated, out of touch with a society that was rapidly evolving beyond them. Zortax shakes his head, marveling at the scope of the changes. It must have been a tremendous upheaval, a complete reordering of our society from top to bottom. It was, Indus agrees, but it was also necessary. We had stagnated, grown complacent in our power and privilege. The humans, for all the chaos they brought, also gave us a chance to renew ourselves, to build something better. The senior diplomat drains the last of his drink, setting the glass down with a decisive clink. And that's exactly what we did. It took time and effort and no small amount of pain, but in the end, we emerged stronger for it. A new Imperium, one ready to take its place as an equal partner in the galactic community. Zortax sits back, his mind reeling with the implications of Indus's tale. He had always known that the Imperium had undergone great changes in the past century, but he had never fully grasped the scale of the transformation or the pivotal role the humans had played in it. The younger diplomat looks up, meeting Indus's gaze with a newfound respect. It seems we owe the humans a great debt, then, for showing us a better way, even if we were too proud to see it at first. Indus nods, a wry smile tugging at his lips. Indeed we do, though I doubt they would see it that way. For them, I suspect it was simply a matter of doing what they believed was right, of standing up for their principles, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The elder diplomat's expression turns thoughtful, almost contemplative. In a way, perhaps that is the greatest lesson the humans have taught us, that sometimes the most important battles are not fought with weapons, but with ideas, with the courage to challenge the status quo, to imagine a different way of being. Zortax nods slowly, absorbing the weight of Indus's words. It is a lesson, he realizes, that will stay with him for a long time to come, a reminder of the power of change and the potential for even the most entrenched societies to evolve and grow. The two diplomats sit in silence for a long moment, each lost in their own thoughts as the stars drift by outside the viewport. The Imperium had come a long way, Zortax reflects, and yet, in some ways, its journey was only just beginning. For as the humans had shown them, there was always room for improvement, for progress, and with the courage and determination to embrace change, even the oldest and most rigid of societies could find a new path forward. It was a daunting prospect, to be sure, but also an exciting one, a chance to build a better future for themselves and for generations yet to come. And as Zortax sits there, pondering the implications of Indus's tale, he can't help but feel a sense of gratitude towards the humans, for showing them the way, even when they hadn't realized they were lost. For being the catalyst of change that had set the Imperium on a new course, and for proving once and for all that even the most unlikely of allies could become the greatest of friends, given time and understanding. It was a lesson Zortax knows that he will carry with him always, a reminder of what is possible when two cultures meet not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals. As partners, in the grand adventure of building a better galaxy for all. Zortax leans back, his eyes wide with wonder. That's incredible. To think that Zardax, the very man who once led our fleets against the humans, would become the symbol of our new alliance. Indus nods, a smile playing across his face. It's a testament to the power of change, my young friend, to the idea that even the most entrenched adversaries can find common ground if they're willing to open their minds and their hearts. The elder diplomat takes another sip of his drink, his gaze distant. I remember the day the Unity set out on its maiden voyage. The entire Imperium watched, holding its collective breath. Some feared that the mission would end in disaster, that the old animosities between our races would resurface and tear the crew apart. He chuckles softly. But Zardax, he knew better. He had seen firsthand the strength and resilience of the human spirit. He knew that if anyone could make this crazy idea work, it was them. Zortax nods, leaning forward eagerly. And the Unity's first contact missions, what were they like? Indus's eyes sparkle with excitement. Oh, they were something else entirely. The Unity would arrive in a new system, and Zardax would personally lead the diplomatic team to the surface. He had a way with words, a charisma that seemed to transcend species and culture. The senior diplomat's voice takes on a note of admiration. He would walk into a room full of wary, suspicious aliens, and within minutes he would have them eating out of his hand. He had this ability to find the common threads that bind us all together, to show that despite our differences, we're all just sentient beings trying to make our way in the universe. Zortax shakes his head in amazement. And the trade routes, the peace deals, all of that was Zardax's doing. Indus spreads his hands. Not entirely, of course. He had a brilliant crew behind him, both human and Ventaxian, but Zardax, he was the glue that held it all together. His vision, his leadership, it made the impossible possible. The elder diplomat's expression turns thoughtful. You know, there was one particular mission that always stuck with me. The Unity had been called to mediate a dispute between two races that had been at war for generations. It was a blood feud, the kind of conflict that seems to defy all reason and logic. He leans forward, his voice lowering. But Zardax, he didn't see it that way. He looked beyond the hatred, beyond the history of violence and retribution. He saw two peoples, both proud and noble in their own ways, both yearning for a way out of the cycle of destruction. Indus takes a deep breath, as if steeling himself. And so he did something that no one had ever dared to do before. He invited the leaders of both races to the Unity, to sit down and talk face to face. It was a risk, a gamble. But Zardax believed that if he could just get them in the same room, if he could make them see each other as living, breathing beings rather than faceless enemies, then maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. Zortax's eyes are wide, his breath caught in his throat. And did they? Did it work? Indus nods slowly, a smile spreading across his face. It did. Oh, it wasn't easy. There were moments when it seemed like the whole thing would fall apart, when the old hatreds would resurface and consume them all. But Zardax, he wouldn't let it happen. He mediated, he cajoled, he reasoned, and in the end he broke through. The leaders signed a peace treaty right there on the Unity, with Zardax and his crew as witnesses. The elder diplomat sits back, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. That, my young friend, that is the power of diplomacy, the power of understanding, of finding the common ground that unites us all. And that is the legacy of Zardax and of the Unity, a legacy that endures to this day, even as they continue their mission among the stars. Zortax leans back, his eyes growing distant as he contemplates Indus's words. The possibility that the Unity and Zardax might be gone, it's a heavy weight on his heart. He thinks of all that Zardax accomplished, all the bridges he built between their two races. The thought of that legacy being snuffed out, lost to the void, it's almost too much to bear. But as he sits there nursing his drink, a flicker of hope stirs within him. He looks up at Indus, his voice low and earnest. But what if they're not gone? What if they're still out there, fighting whatever threat they encountered? Indus sighs, shaking his head. I wish I could believe that, Zortax, but it's been years since we received that message. If they were still alive, Surely we would have heard something by now. Zortax nods slowly, acknowledging the logic in Indus's words, but still he can't quite let go of that sliver of hope. Maybe they're just too far away to send a message, or maybe they're in hiding, biding their time until they can strike back. Indus smiles sadly, reaching out to pat Zortax's hand. You have a good heart, my friend, and I admire your optimism, but we have to be realistic. The Unity, Zardax, they may be lost to us. Zortax swallows hard, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. He knows Indus is right, knows that hoping for a miracle is foolish, but he can't help it. The thought of losing Zardax, of losing that shining example of what their two races can achieve together, it's a pain he's not sure he can bear. He takes a deep breath, trying to steady himself. You're right, of course, we have to accept the possibility that they're gone, but even if they are, we can't let their sacrifice be in vain. Indus nods, his expression solemn. No, we can't. We have to honor their memory by continuing their work, by building on the foundation they laid, by striving for peace and understanding between all races. Indus raises his own glass, clinking it gently against Zortax's. To the future and to the hope, however faint, that somewhere out there the Unity still sails, that Zardax and his dream live on. The two diplomats sit in silence, sipping their drinks as the starlight plays across their faces, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of the man who changed everything, and the legacy he leaves behind. In that moment, the galaxy feels vast and unknowable, full of dangers and wonders beyond imagining. But it also feels full of promise, full of the potential for growth, for change, for unity. And as Zortax sits there, staring out at the infinite expanse of space, he can't help but feel a flicker of that promise, a sense that, no matter what the future holds, they will face it together. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.